Hello world, it's Berto5, Qapla, and welcome to a video I wanted to do about the most recent episode of Star Trek Lower Decks, Room for Growth. Now I know I haven't done reviews for the last two episodes before this, The Least Dangerous Game and Mining the Mind's Mines, and that's really because the review would go something like this. The episode was mostly boring. I chuckled once. There was nothing offensive about it. It was just boring. And honestly, that would really be all I have to say about these last two Lower Decks episodes. The season started off, episode 1, Grounded. I actually thought was a damn near excellent episode. I rated it an 8.5, and I would stick behind that rating. It was a really good episode, but with good episodes come expectations, and expectations were not met. And unfortunately, this fourth episode of the season, Room for Growth, was much like the previous two. I had a chuckle, perhaps a chuckle, but that was really about it. The only thing different about episode 4 is that I really think they missed a mark that could have. It wasn't going to make this an 8 episode. It wasn't going to make it an 8 out of 10. Maybe I'd give this a 3 or 4 out of 10, like the previous episodes. Maybe it would have bumped it up 1, maybe 2 points. But I have to give Mike McMahon and his team that work on Lower Decks credit. More so than in Star Trek Discovery and Star Trek Picard and even Strange New Worlds. Lower Decks does not go out of their way to destroy or really bring offense to previous canon. Let's face it, if you're watching Star Trek Discovery or any of the other live-action Trek shows, you know that they destroy existing canon and recreate it in favor of its new Matrix, if you get what I'm saying. But Lower Decks, they don't do that. Okay? At worst, I can accuse them of being boring, but when they do well, they do really well. And they're often able to bring up, we will call them member berries, but they're often able to bring up small names or themes from previous Trek episodes and just put it into their show seamlessly. And it's always a nice callback for us, I want to say real Trekkies, because that's not PC thing to say, but us hardcore, dedicated Trekkies who have seen every episode of every show before Discovery, not once, not twice, a minimum of 5 times, and some shows 100 times. Okay, maybe not 100, but easily 50. I don't know how many times I saw in the Pale Moonlight, Trials and Tribulations, All Good Things, but they are well over a dozen. I'm sure it's well over 24 times. And the so-so episodes, at a minimum of 3, and probably more than that. Okay? It's just the way we are. And you say, wow, who has time for that? Well, you know what? I've been on this earth 43 years now, probably 35 of them actively watching Star Trek. And there's plenty of time. There's plenty of time to watch them if you care. And that's how I am. But anyway, let's get to the point. This last episode, Room for Growth, and there's spoilers. Okay, so if you haven't seen it, I don't know what to tell you. Just click off and come back after you watched it, if you care. Room for Growth is about Captain Freeman and the engineers of the Cerritos have been under a lot of stress for various reasons. And so Captain Freeman takes the engineers to a Federation or a Starfleet ship called the Dove. And the Dove is basically a spa. It's a futuristic spa, and she gives the engineers orders to relax. And when you land on the spa, there's the 3-armed alien from the animated series. There's one of them. She's the director of the spa. And I mean, you get massages. They have puppy therapy. They have the puppy pen where you just go in and you roll around and there's dozens of puppies coming all over. And I thought that was quite funny. And then they for the more deviant among you, we also have kittens. So that was kind of funny. Later on, when they're having a major issue and they're like, we got to go puppy pen, bring it to full puppiness. And they're like, we've given her all they've got. We're out of puppies. They're like, we even threw in a few rabbits, a few bunnies, and it's having no effect. That was probably the funniest part of the episode. But anyway, the engineers, Starfleet engineers, whenever they want to relax, and this goes back to Scotty in the original series, continued through Geordi and into Miles O'Brien. I'm not so sure about B'Elanna, but Scotty, Geordi, Miles, anytime they were quote unquote on vacation, what did they want to do? Read technical manuals, keep up to date. And to be honest, an engineer myself, my favorite holiday trip was sitting on a beach in the Bahamas in a hammock reading Introduction to SQL Programming Language. That was like my favorite. And it wasn't really a vacation. I was technically working, but I mean that I have a picture of it. I was so happy. Anyway, that's what engineers like to do. So, of course, for the end of this episode, the engineers have to engineer a way now it's not for them, but Captain Freeman goes into critical overworkness, and they need to get her. They have a band that tells how stressed they are, and her band goes past red into black, that it's so bad that she's on the verge of a complete, I guess, meltdown, and they have to very quickly get her de-stressed. Nothing on the Dove is working. The puppies aren't working. The bunnies aren't working. The massages aren't working. So the engineers decide, we've got to build something. And they build a machine that instantly rejuvenates her and takes away all of her stress. And they roll it out and she gets in it and she's cured. And it was nice. And it was a bit predictable. But the diehard Trekkie in me really felt they missed a big thing. What did they miss? Well, does the name Dr. Elias Giger ring a bell to you? If he doesn't, I don't blame you. He was in one episode of Star Trek Deep Space Nine. But Dr. Giger was from the fairly popular episode In the Cards. He was the doctor who was working on the cellular regeneration and entertainment chamber. He was the guy who was constantly in fear of the Soulless Minions of Orthodoxy. Jake and Nog came to know him because he won an auction that included a Willie Mays baseball card, and Jake really wanted to get the baseball card for his dad, and Nog and him, they tried to buy the card. Dr. Giger wouldn't sell it, but he would trade it for a whole bunch of scientific equipment he needed. Nog is like, we can't bring you this unless you tell us what you're doing with it. And then he gives us his spiel about how people don't have to die, that he realized death is the result of cellular boredom, and his entire life he worked on this cellular regeneration and entertainment chamber. This would have been such a great place to bring it back into Lower Decks, because we never got an answer as to what actually happened with Dr. Giger. Last we saw him, he was with one of the Wayuns, and you're like, well, he was going to go talk with the Dominion, but he was a Federation citizen. the war hadn't happened yet. So it only makes sense he would have found his way back to the Federation. And maybe, he said he was pretty close to his research being done. And a show like Lower Decks is exactly where you want to bring these types of characters back and tie up some of these loose ends from shows like Deep Space Nine, which was just a one-off episode. But how great would it have been if they could have said, instead of saying we engineered this, they could have said, we researched this. We found that Dr. Giger was really close to building something, and we finished it. And this is, instead of saying, this is a relaxation chamber, they said, this is the cellular regeneration and entertainment chamber that Dr. Giger was working on. And then then Captain Freeman could have got in the chamber, came out of the chamber, said the exact same line she says in Lower Decks, that she feels completely rejuvenated, and yay, everybody's happy. All the bands turn green. And then the head of the Dove, once they leave, she has the machine destroyed because she realizes if every ship in the fleet had one of these chambers, there would be no reason to have the Dove, and she'd be out of a job. It just would have worked so much better. In the Cards is a fan favorite episode of Deep Space Nine. I really think, like I said, I really would have think it would have helped me enjoy this episode a little more. And I'm kind of surprised that Mike McMahon and his team let this one slip. They're usually pretty good about it. So anyway, that's really about it. This episode of Lower Decks, I'd give it a 4 out of 10, just because it was on the boring side. And I don't know what next week will bring. I will watch. I'm not sure it'll be worth a review. If it is, then I will certainly review it. So thanks all for hanging out, and let's hear it one more time to Dr. Elias Giger, a man ahead of his time.
We're in.
Do you know how many germs are transmitted by a handshake? You want to kill me? Just not if we have a deal.